Today, we're taking a deep dive into what has got to be one of the most fascinating strategic plays of the modern era. We're looking at a company that looked at the human body and decided, you know what? We're not going to treat this with traditional medicine. We're going to treat it like a machine that just needs a software update. We are unpacking the Moderna strategy and how this organization basically built an operating system for medicine. If you love understanding how complex systems and truly audacious goals come together to change the world, you are in exactly the right place for this explainer.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Imagine for a second, what if we stopped trying to invent bespoke, one-off drugs from scratch every single time a new disease pops up? What if instead we built an underlying operating system for the human body? Framing Moderna as just another traditional pharmaceutical company completely misses the point. To really get their strategy, you have to look at them as a Silicon Valley-style tech startup that just happens to be working in the field of biology.
So let's start with phase one, the radical thesis, covering 2010 to 2011. You see, every great tech company starts with a foundational thesis. Moderna's origin story kicked off when Flagship Ventures launched a project based on scientist Derek Rossi's incredible discovery around modified mRNA. By October of 2011, they brought on Stéphane Bancel as CEO, and literally from day one, their core approach was fundamentally different from everyone else in the industry. They decided that modified messenger RNA wasn't just some chemical compound. They viewed it purely as information.
To really lock this concept into your mind, listen to how Stéphane Bancel put it. Since mRNA is an information-based platform, it works similar to a computer's operating system, letting researchers insert new genetic code, like adding an app. I mean, that isn't just a clever metaphor. That is the entire blueprint of the company. They weren't building a pill, right? They were building an operating system, where the mRNA sequences are the code, and the individual vaccines or treatments are just the apps running on that code.
Now, this is a total 180 from the rest of the industry. Traditional pharma relies on chemistry. It's artisanal, it's highly bespoke, and creating a single drug typically takes about 10 years of agonizing trial and error to get right. Moderna's model, though, is built entirely on information. The idea was, if you figure out how to safely deliver mRNA into a cell, all you have to do to treat a completely new disease is just change the sequence of the information you're sending. It's an absolutely revolutionary way to look at biology.
Moving right along to phase two, funding the factory first, spanning 2013 to 2015. Here's the problem they ran into. Building an operating system is extraordinarily expensive, and it takes years before you can launch your very first commercial app. At this point, Moderna had, 25 employees and 0 commercial products. They needed an immense amount of capital to fund this biological operating system, but they absolutely did not want to sell the company or give away all their equity to venture capitalists. They needed a highly unconventional financing strategy.
So instead of trying to sell a drug they didn't even have yet, they basically leased out their platform's potential. They signed this massive landmark deal with AstraZeneca for $240 million upfront, plus another $180 million in milestones. And that allowed AstraZeneca to pursue 40 different targets using Moderna's technology. Then, they just replicated that exact same model with Alexion, Merck, and they even secured a $25 million grant from DARPA. By 2015, they had raised a record-breaking $450 million. They generated enormous capital strictly by licensing out their capabilities.
The crucial point here is absolutely brilliant in its simplicity. Sell access to the platform to fund the factory, not sell the company. By locking in these massive upfront payments from legacy pharma companies, they secured the hundreds of millions of dollars they needed to build their physical and digital infrastructure. And the best part? They did it all while retaining complete control of their core operating system.
Which brings us to phase three, the digital assembly line, from 2016 to 2018. With their bank accounts fully padded, Moderna entered their industrialization phase. This is where they actually took all that capital and started building the heavy machinery required to compile their biological code at an industrial scale.
It's wild to think about the sheer scale of what they built before they ever had a commercial product to sell. Back in July 2018, they opened a 200,000 square foot digitally enabled manufacturing plant in Norwood, Massachusetts. But they didn't just build a physical factory, they built a digital one too. They created this drug design studio hosted entirely on Amazon Web Services. And this gave their scientists the capability to design new mRNA sequences in a matter of hours. Literally, they were typing genetic code into a web browser and compiling it into physical medicine.
Wall Street definitely took notice of this robust infrastructure. By December 2018, Moderna went public, achieving a phenomenal $7.5 billion valuation at their IPO. At the time, that was the single biggest biotech IPO in history.
But wait, here is the mind-bending juxtaposition of the Moderna story up to this point. They had this massive $7.5 billion valuation, the largest biotech IPO ever, and they had absolutely zero approved products. Not a single app had been fully approved to run on their operating system yet. The investors weren't buying a drug. They were buying the promise of the platform.
And then the world changed. Phase 4, the ultimate 42-day test in 2020. This was it. The ultimate high-stakes trial by fire for the operating system they had spent a decade building, the global COVID-19 pandemic. Everything they had theorized about mRNA being this agile, programmable platform was about to be put to the test in real time, with literally millions of lives on the line.
This is where that whole software metaphor literally comes to life. On January 11, 2020, the genetic sequence of the novel coronavirus was published online because Moderna's drug design studio was already up and running. They just downloaded the sequence and coded an mRNA app. To explain in detail how this actually works biologically, they simply programmed instructions for the body's own ribosomes. Those ribosomes act like 3D printers, and the mRNA told them to print the virus's spike protein. Once that harmless protein is printed, the immune system learns to recognize it and attack it. They just changed the code. Just 42 days later, on February 24th, they shipped the very first clinical batch to the NIH, and in 63 days, the first human was dosed. An incredibly complex process that traditionally took 10 years of chemistry was compressed into 63 days of information processing.
To scale this up at unprecedented speeds, the U.S. government's BARDA awarded them $483 million to push toward licensure, and they signed a 10-year deal with Lonza to manufacture 1 billion doses a year. But it's so vital to realize that this speed wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a rush job. The COVID-19 vaccine was actually the 10th program they had run in that specific modality. The previous 9 programs they ran over the years had completely de-risked the underlying platform. The operating system was totally proven. They just had to compile a new app.
And the financial payoff of that strategy? Just staggering. Let's look at the numbers. In 2020, Moderna brought in $803 million. In 2021, once their COVID app was deployed globally, revenue skyrocketed to $18.5 billion. And in 2022, it peaked near an estimated $19.2 billion. That is roughly a 20-fold increase in a single year. It completely, unequivocally vindicated their strategy to fund the factory first.
But a platform can't survive on just one app forever, right? So what's next? That brings us to Phase 5. Launching the second act, looking at 2024 to 2026 and beyond. Moderna now has this formidable war chest of cash and a globally validated operating system.
Well, we actually got our answer pretty recently. On May 31st, 2024, the FDA approved mRESVIA, which is their vaccine for RSV. This is a huge milestone, folks, because it is the very first mRNA vaccine approved for a disease other than COVID-19. It's the ultimate proof that the underlying platform works, and that COVID wasn't just some lucky break. The operating system can officially run multiple applications.
Riding that momentum, they are now pivoting to an incredibly ambitious 10-product launch strategy. They're rolling out next-generation COVID shots, a combination flu and COVID vaccine, and perhaps most amazingly, a personalized cancer vaccine in partnership with Merck. The data on this one is just breathtaking. It's shown a 49% risk reduction in melanoma recurrence. They are literally using their information platform to program a patient's own body to fight off returning cancer cells.
But, reality check, scaling 10 new products all at once takes serious financial discipline, especially as those massive COVID revenues start to normalize. So, their current strategic pivot involves cutting $1.1 billion in research and development spending. They're actively balancing their huge scientific ambitions with fiscal responsibility, and they're aiming to reach complete cash break-even by the year 2028. They're tightening up the ship to make sure the platform sustains itself long into the future. Moderna literally proved that if you treat biology like an information problem, you can solve it at the speed of software. So if the human body is just hardware waiting for new software, what disease will we delete next? It completely changes how we think about the future of medicine. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.